Sorry, assholes, your quiet day at the office is about to get severely fucked up.
Guys, welcome back to the After Action Review. You know me, I'm Nick Guy, the world's most okayest Green Beret. And today is a treat because we have somebody that is, well, we kind of always bring guests that aren't okay. We always bring guests in who are at the top of their field. And we have Sergeant Major Mike Vining, former EOD technician, former Master Breacher, for Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta Force Combat Applications Group, Army Compartmentalized Element, whatever you want to call them. Sergeant Major, it's great to have you on. And real quick, let's just go right through. We'll go right through. Sorry, we had a little bit of an issue with the connection, but I want to go through his bio real quick because it is impressive. I wish my DD-214 read like this. So, Sergeant Major Vining, he completed basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, went to EOD school, served with the 99th Ordnance Detachment in Vietnam, completed 12 months of combat duty, and then he was actually discharged from the Army. This is something I did not know. He re-entered the Army in 1973 and was assigned to the 63rd Ordnance Detachment, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. In 1978, he was accepted into Delta Force, where he served until 1985. He completed OTC, or Operator's Training Course, and participated in numerous combat operations, including Operation Eagle Claw, the Iranian Hostage Rescue Mission, Urgent Fury, the invasion of Grenada, and then from 85 to 86, assigned back to EOD, then went back to CAG, and he served as Chief EOD Technician, Research and Development Sergeant Major, and Breaching Sergeant Major. And I'm not going to bore you guys with the rest of the details because it's just kind of, it has no meaning coming from me. So we're going to bring it back to Sergeant Major. Again, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, it's, we talked a little bit before we hit record. You're a little bit aware of the meme, but you're a big deal in military circles on the internet. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Nick. Where'd you like me to start and to kind of highlight what my experiences, say, in Vietnam, or?
Yeah, I want to start off in Vietnam because we all know you through Delta Force. So I want to start off with Vietnam because I read that the achievement that you're most proud of in your military career is your EOD badge.
Yes, yeah, and the CIB.
And the CIB.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to start there in your EOD days of Vietnam.
Yeah. Well, I was in tech after EOD school. I was in tech escort at Edgewood Arsenal, Maryland, and then I volunteered for Vietnam. Finally got orders for Vietnam. So I entered Vietnam in February of 1970, and I was assigned to the 99th Ordnance Detachment, EOD, and we were based out of Phuc Vinh. At that time was called Camp Gorvad, and later on it was named Camp Casey when General Casey was killed after the incursion into Cambodia. So We had about 15 Army EOD units in total in Vietnam, scattered throughout the country. And what we do is we divide it up into zones. So the 99th, we operated on the northwest area of 3 Corps, just northwest of Saigon, up against the Cambodian border. So we supported all of 1st Cav's operations in the area, part of the 1st Infantry Division when they were there, and then they pulled out. The 199th Light Infantry Brigade, 11th ACR, and then we had 2 on-site teams. The first one was at Quan Loy, and the second one was when we moved out of Quan Loy, we went to Song Bay, which was known as Fire Support Base Buttons. So I was there in Vietnam from February 70 to January 71. The big thing was during that time frame was the incursion into Cambodia. In May of June of 1970, Nixon authorized us to go for 60 days into Cambodia. So that was a busy time for us. We were doing operations across the border. 1st Cav was finding a lot of enemy caches. Right there at the beginning of the war in May, they discovered, 1st of the 9th Pink Team helicopters discovered some caches in the jungle, stacks of ammunition. So then 2nd of the 12th 1st Cav went in there and secured it, and they found 28 cache sites in the jungle. And then they called us in to dispose of the cache sites. So that became known as Rock Island East. Rock Island East was the largest enemy weapons and ammunition cache that was discovered during the war. There was over 327 tons of weapons and ammunition in those 28 cache sites. And so we had a 7-man team, EOD team, that went in there and set it up to blow. Initially they lost 7 soldiers capturing the cache site and 20 wounded. And then while we occupied the cache site for about 6 days, we had 3 more deaths. It was an accidental death with a claymore. It was an automatic ambush that they had set up around our perimeter, and they were taking it down, and it functioned. So these were scattered along the trail, both sides of the trail. So we had to use detonating cord and cover it up with all the blocks. We brought in like 300 cases of C4 to, prime it. And we had dual detonating cord lines that we buried because we kept getting contact. The enemy was just, was trying to see if they could find any vulnerable sections of our perimeter. And so as we set this up, we started to, then we had a 2-ship HLZ to bring the helicopters to come down to exfil out. So we had a small security team there with us, and the last 2 helicopters. And we had 10 priming systems of 15 minutes. And then we had these charges around the perimeter to keep the enemy away as we withdrew out of the perimeter. So this is the funny part. We lit the priming charges, and we got on the helicopters. And the helicopters, we were too overloaded, and with the helicopters not getting the amount of maintenance they needed, we couldn't take off. After we lit the fuse charges, we were just too much. So the door gunner taps me on the shoulder and says, I'll have to get on the helicopter behind me. And a couple other guys had to get out. Well, the helicopter behind us had a problem. So here's like 5 of us there, and the helicopters are going off. So I was getting ready to go over and cut the fuses again, and another helicopter circling around came down and picked us up. It was exciting times. Oh, while this was going on, our scare charges were going off. helicopter pilots thought we were getting mortared. And so anyway, came in and picked us off, and they could see our mushroom cloud from 50 miles away. So it was a pretty big shot.
Oh my God. So, all right. So, we have a lot of vets that tune in, listen to this. I think most guys are familiar with a BIP. Most guys have done it in their careers at some point. But we all know P, P stands for plenty, but really that's not the case when you're dealing with something this large and you're trying to lay this in while taking fire. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, you don't hear anything like that.
Yeah, we took ground to air fire as we departed, and I forget how far we were away when it blew up. Weren't that far away. I do have photos of the shot going off.
So that was the largest BIP in the Vietnam War, and was that the third largest? Because I know you were
that was the largest, called Rock Island East. It was named after the Rock Island Arsenal. That's where is it? Is it in Illinois or Rock Island Arsenal? So because it was so large, we had there was over about 1,000 rounds of 85 millimeter fixed ammunition that we blew up there, and the 85 millimeter fixed Chi-Com ammunition is either for the T-34 tank or the D-44 85 millimeter Hauser. So though we did not see any T-34 tanks or any of those big field guns, they had stocked the ammunition up certainly for that. They had like 1,000 rounds. After the 2 months of incursion in Cambodia, things were quiet for a long time, for about 6 months before they started to rebuild back up. Because we were at this point in the war withdrawing. We were under the Vietnamization program, where the South Vietnamese were taking over a lot of our fire support bases. And the second largest enemy weapons and ammunition cache was the place called the City. That was in Cambodia too. The City, I wasn't on the City. The City was a built-up area. They had schoolhouse, barracks, hospital, motor pool, and a weapons and ammunition storage area. And so that was the second largest. And the third largest was a place called Warehouse Hill, and that was in Cambodia. And I was on that. I was part of a 4-man EOD team, and we blew that up. It was Warehouse Hill was a ridge line that had tunnels dug inside of it, and there was about 14 cache sites that were underground. And so we put in explosives and we blew up that. And that was the third largest, Warehouse Hill. You can't find anything on the internet or anything about Warehouse Hill. It's like never.
Why is that?
I don't know why it's not in any history, but I do have the incident report from all this stuff.
Man, that's incredible. Now I want to circle back to those 85 millimeters, because I'm going to ask you to speculate a little bit, because you didn't see any. There were no T-34s. There were no fixed gun positions that would accept that ammunition. The current wars, our wars, the IED threat was massive. I mean, were the Vietnamese, were the communists using any of that sort of stuff to create IEDs, anything like that?
They were actually using our own ordnance, dud ordnance, to make IEDs, whether it be a 250-pound bomb, a 155, or any submunitions like, Blue 3B bomblet. They were converting those into anti-personnel mines. They were even converting them into hand grenades. So they were using a lot of our dud ordnance, they would take like a 105 round, put it up in a bunker complex, and they'd take our 105s and put them up in trees above the bunkers, so that when we would approach the bunkers, they would set the 105s off that were in the trees. So,
That's some
yeah, I didn't see
ingenuity.
too much of them converting their ammunition, but they certainly converted our ammunition.
Man, and in case anybody's listening that's not in the know, there's a reason we don't use dispersal bombs anymore. I'm gonna nerd out a little bit with the JTAC piece, but we don't use dispersal bombs because of the high dud rate with the bomblets. But they're also highly unstable. So these guys were, they were brave enough to use bomblets as hand grenades. That's incredible. Like, again, like, this is nothing that I've ever read. That's amazing. I have a little bit of respect for
Oh, yeah, I've seen videos that showing the Vietnamese, like the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese, they're taking a bomb, like a 250, 500-pound bomb, and actually sawing it in two, and then with hammers knocking out the explosives to reuse the explosives.
Man, that's wild. That is wild. Ingenuity knows no bounds, especially when you're a guerrilla force. Yeah. So, all right, I wanted to hit on that because your Vietnam service is something that kind of gets shadowed, and those are incredible stories. I still, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that's trying to destroy an enemy cache, under fire and setting up basically screening charges to keep them out of the wire while you get on the bird and then fly away from a mushroom cloud that's visible 50 miles away. So I wanted to hit that's an incredible story. So after Vietnam, you left the Army, correct?
Yeah, the war, I just, I wasn't thinking about making the military a career, and the war was winding down. So I got out, went back to Michigan, got a job working in a factory making Ford body parts, press operator. But I was looking at, it was a good job, it was paid well, but I just couldn't see doing that for 20, 30 years. And then in 1973, the Israel and the Arabs were at it again, the Yom Kippur War, and 82nd was put on alert. So I went down, saw a recruiter, and at this time, they weren't taking very many prior services back into the military because Vietnam had downsized, but they were taking EOD. So the recruiter says, well, you will come back in, but you'll have to come back in as EOD. And I says, fine. I says, I wouldn't come back anything else. And so anyway, I went to Fort Leonard Wood. So I was at Fort Leonard Wood from 73 to 78. And just doing, conventional EOD stuff at a basic training post, engineer post too. And I was actually getting bored with EOD at that point. And so I volunteered for Special Forces. As a Special Forces medic, I took EMT training. And so I had a school date to go through Special Forces, but then I got a phone call from a sergeant major at our control and said that they're forming a new unit up at Fort Bragg, and they're looking for 6 EOD techs in this new unit. And he gave me a telephone number. So I called Fort Bragg, and the person answered the phone, told him a little bit about who I was, and they were looking for NCOs that had combat experience. And so he said, can come down for an interview. So I flew to Bragg, and then that was where they're forming up Delta Force, and at the old stockade on Butner Road.
Yeah.
And they kicked the prisoners out and put them downtown there in Fayetteville at the county jail. And then we took over the stockade, but 2 weeks later, I PCS'd to Fort Bragg, and they were starting. So there were 6 of us, 6 EOD folks that went to Bragg, and they were starting the first operator training course. So we had to go through, we had to do the 15-mile night march with a 40-pound pack timed, and then we had to do the 5-event PT test and had to do the swim test. But then we started OTC. We did not go through selection. We just, because they're starting the first OTC course and they wanted us in, but under the understanding that we would have to go through and pass the selection process upon completing. So we were doing things backwards, and only 2 of us made it through OTC, was Dennis Wolf and myself. And then we went and did the fall selection in '78 and passed that. And then we had 6 in OTC2 and only 1 person in OTC2 EOD. So we only had 3 EOD folks that made it through OTC and the selection process. And then the 3 of us were all legs. So then we had to go to jump school. And but we went to jump school at Fort Bragg. The let's see, the 7th Special Forces Group were running a jump school at Bragg. So we went through that jump school. And so we only had 3 EOD folks, and they wanted 6. So they took, at that time, you know, before the 18 series, Special Forces had, you know, the same like 12B and 11B. And so we had some 12Bs, and we actually sent them to EOD school. So to order to have a total of 6 into the unit. So those guys then would be our assistant whenever we had to do any EOD work. They would help us out, the 3 Special Forces guys that went through.
Go ahead.
And basically then we became, our unit became, well, what do you call it? Anyway, we became certified.
Okay.
And you know, 5th group had stood up a unit called Blue Light. A lot of people thought Delta and Blue Light were one of the same, but Blue Light was a interim group that was set up, and then as soon as we became online, the Blue Light was dismantled. And so, a lot of the guys there's several people from Blue Light that actually came through the, you know, selection process into Delta.
Yeah, there was a great private range about 45 minutes outside of Clarksville, and it was owned and ran by a former 5th group dude who was with Blue Light, and he was telling me, like, yeah, part of our Q course, part of, you know, for that mission specific, was to go through OTC back then, which was shocking to me. I had no idea that was a thing. But I mean, going through, you know, now, you know, nowadays when it comes to Delta, you know, EOD assets kind of fall under that direct support role. So, but you know, again, this is weird. You know, it's fascinating. You know, in the early days, you know, they wanted EODs as qualified operators.
Yeah.
And was there any specific reason why?
Well, because of the counterterrorist mission, you know, at that time, we had an unclassified mission. Our unclassified mission was POW rescue. Basically, because of what happened in Vietnam and Sante, how they had to create this special rescue force up at Fort Bragg, then send them over there. And of course, when they got over there and they did the Sante raid, the prison was empty.
Yeah.
And the reason the prison was empty is not because it was because of the monsoons. The prison had flooded, and so they moved the prisoners. It wasn't anything that got leaked out, but we wanted to have a stand-up force that would do, you know, POW type rescues. Then our classified mission would have been, you know, rescuing hostages, say, trapped on an airliner that they were being held hostage. That was popular at the time. The terrorists were hijacking aircraft and keeping people on planes and stuff like that. So, stand-up thing. And Beckwith, of course, he opened Delta up MOS immaterial. You know, he wanted people with different skills. He wanted people that were heavy equipment, had a heavy equipment operator background. He wanted people that were cooks. He wanted people for all different skills. But in a counter-terrorist thing, you needed people with different skills. If you need somebody to get on a bulldozer and run a bulldozer, you have somebody that would do it. You need somebody to pretend they're a chef. or to deliver, to do food or whatever. So though most of the people came from the Special Forces and Ranger background, we did have people from armor, from all different fields, and we did have one cook. So he wanted people with various skill backgrounds for counter-terrorists.
Well, he was definitely ahead. He was ahead of his time because the Special Operations Committee has kind of embraced that. At least within the Special Forces Regiment with the whole 18 X-ray program, which I went to college before I enlisted. And, I came into the Army with 0 Army experience. And that was kind of the idea, to bring people in with all sorts of life experiences, which would make the organization better. So he was a little ahead of his time, because I know back, in the 70s, the Army was probably a little more rigid than it is today.
Yeah, he had a hard time getting the unit stood up. He had the vision based on, he had spent time with the British SAS and seen how they operated. He wanted to have a unit capable just like the British SAS. And of course, our selection process was modeled exactly on the British SAS model. And then on our class, our OTC-1 class, we had guys from the British SAS as instructors coming in and shooting, as marksman instructors and stuff like that in the unit. And so our unit has always been closely aligned with the British SAS.
Now, I don't know if it's a true story or if it's just rumor, but in those first OTC classes, they had SAS, like you said, SAS marksman instructors. Were they sawing the sights off of Stens?
We had M3 grease guns, 45 caliber.
Okay.
Yeah, we had the M3. Beckwith got, that's our first assault rifles, was the M3 grease gun. Yes, he had our sights taken off our weapons because we were doing instinctive shooting. We were shooting at 3x5 cards. We shot up a lot of 3x5 cards. And double tapping, the SAS taught us to double tap to 2 rounds. And you can actually, with the M3 grease gun, do a pretty good job of double tapping with your finger control. It's easy to just do 1 target, 2 rounds, another target, 2 rounds. And it was all instinctive, close quarter battle, instinctive shooting is what we were taught. And then, of course, with the M3, it's an open bolt, and the cover is the safety. So once you open the cover, there is no safety. But one of our guys developed, his name was Terry Hall, developed a trigger safety for the M3 grease gun. So all of our guns were modified so we would have the cover open, and we had on the handle a trigger safety.
So was that the only modification to the M3?
Yes. Yeah. Now some people cut the barrels down. Now some people had like a 3-inch barrel. But yeah, the M3 and Beckwith believed and we had 240. We always carried 245s, and we had M1911 A1s match. These were match 45s. They were really good 45s. A normal 45, you rattle it just shakes. These were really nice. They call match grade 45s that we had, and so we carried 245s and an M3, and of course we had, he believed in having the same kind of ammunition, so that if you ran out of, you can cross load your ammunition because you're carrying only 45 caliber. And but during the Iran hostage Operation Eagle Claw, then we got in CAR 15s. So most of us carried CAR 15s at that time for Eagle Claw.
Okay, man. All right, we're gonna get into that. I'm still kind of reeling because nowadays in the world of high-end shooting, in the world of black side soft, you have these incredibly modified weapon systems that ensure complete accuracy and put them in the hands of a skilled shooter, and they're surgical with them. I'm just still reeling from the fact that you guys had the M3 grease gun, which was a cheap, it was a cheap and easily produced. Was it like Ford Motor Company made them or
Oh,
something?
I
Like,
don't know who.
yeah,
That's a good question. I never researched that.
Like back during World War II, the Thompson was too expensive and too complex to keep mass producing. So later on in the war, they replaced them with these M3s, and then they go and they saw off the sights, and they have you guys drilling holes on 3x5 carts. That is a serious testament to a CAG shooting package. It really is.
Yeah, we had to shoot 3x5 cards. Yeah.
Oh man, that's incredible. All right, so we got through OTC. Now we're coming up to Operation Eagle Claw, and you had turned me on to this great book, and I've already ordered it, but it's releasing in 5 days, correct? The 24th.
Yeah.
Okay, it's called Operation Eagle Claw 1980, the disastrous bid to end the Iran hostage crisis. And it's written by Justin Williamson. And you played an integral part in the research for this book, correct?
Yeah, I helped Justin put him in contact with a lot of people this is going to be the most, I think. I haven't seen the book. I've proofread the draft, but this is going to be the most accurate account of what happened on the mission. Even in Beckwith's book, in which he had a writer write it, there's errors in Beckwith's book, and those errors have been repeated in other books. And for example, in Beckwith's book, we had 3 elements. We had a red element, white element, and blue element. And he got the white and blue element mixed up. The red and white element was the assault elements. The blue element was the security support element. And so, and then I was in the white element. And other errors. One of the things he said in his book was before we left the Desert One, that we had accountability of everybody, and that was not true. It was a mad to get out of there. The fixed wing aircraft at this time were very low on fuel. We could have very easily left somebody behind on Desert One. We did not have accountability. I was in the burning aircraft with my team, and we had a 4-man team. And when we got into the aircraft to get out of there, I didn't see the other 2 guys from my team. And not until we got to Marsaria in Oman, where we landed, and then we had a head count, did we know that who was there, who wasn't there. And then 8 people, of course, were left behind in the desert, who were 5 Air Force guys in the EC-130 up front were killed, and 3 Marine crewmen on the RH-53D were killed. But we could have easily left somebody behind. We had no accountability.
I mean, it's an interesting anecdote in American special operations history and lore, because I think a lot of people know about Desert One, and they know about the blunders, and they know, I'm speaking from my experience. Like, all right, we had an aircraft collision, and a bunch of people were killed, but I don't think a lot of people know like what the mission was there to accomplish. I don't think a lot of people understand how it kind of plays into the Iranian hostage crisis.
Yeah, well, this was the second time the embassy was actually occupied. The first time it was just occupied I think in February of 1979, it was occupied just briefly. And then, of course, on 4 November of 79, it was occupied by the students there. And they took over and they captured several hostages. I think altogether, initially was 66 hostages. And of course, some of the embassy staff people were not in the compound at the time. They eventually made their way to the Canadian embassy, and thus the movie Argo, about how they got out of Iran. The Canadians helped them get out of Iran. And of course, then they released several of the hostages, some of the women, there was also some people there that, that they released. So they eventually held 53 hostages. And our mission was to go in and rescue those 53 hostages that were scattered around inside the embassy. It was a complex mission. It was all the long range that we had to do. And the only helicopter at the time that we had to do the mission was what you call RH-53D helicopter. It's a Navy helicopter, and it's used for counter mining. What they normally do in RH-53D is they do grid patterns in the daylight, and they have mine detectors that they drag in the water, and they search for mines, and they do these grid patterns. And so that was our helicopter of choice. So initially we had, when this mission was going on, we were actually out. I was with B Squadron, and we were out in Colorado skiing. We were on a ski trip, cold weather mountain training, plus a little skiing, downhill skiing. Beckwith says that, he said that sometimes you get diamonds. And so that was one of our diamonds, is to go out on a ski trip. And so we were out there on November 4th, when the embassy was taken. So we got the call to come on back. So we went down, we drove down to Colorado Springs, got a plane out of Colorado Springs. We landed out there at Camp McCall, and then we went right into isolation and to get ready for this mission. So, and then from there we went up to Camp Perry, Virginia, and we stayed in some buildings up at Camp Perry, and that's where we did a lot of our training. And at this time they were putting all the components together, and then we moved down to Yuma Proving Grounds in Arizona to do the actual desert part of the training at Yuma. And then we had the Navy 53s and the Navy pilots and all that. But we had problems with the Navy pilots. We had OPSEC problems. We had, they would get lost in the desert. They wouldn't land where we wanted them to land. They just couldn't grasp the night flying with night vision goggles, because they were used to flying in the daytime. So anyway, they were replaced by Marine pilots and Marine crew, and a lot of these were they weren't one helicopter crew put together. They picked from the Marine Corps. So again, we still had a train-up period, and we still had problems with the helicopters. They were always our weak point. And then we had devised different plans. One plan was to actually jump into a Desert One site. We had blivets fuel bladders that would drop, and then the helicopters would come in and we'd fill them up. But we had problems with the blivet drops. Sometimes the parachutes wouldn't open, and the blivets would crash and break open. And and Beckwith didn't like the parachute operation part of it, because we could get people hurt in the parachute jump. So we take fixed wing in. So we had 3 MC-130s and 3 EC-130s. The EC-130s were our bladder birds. They had 5,000 gallons of aviation fuel in a giant bladder, and to refill the helicopters and stuff. And then the helicopters would fly off the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz, and we all meet up at Desert One. Then we would go to our hide site, which was Desert 2, and it was a warehouse building where we would, outside of Tehran, and then the helicopters would move to another site and be camouflaged with nets and stuff like that, waiting for the next night to launch the mission. And we had trucks, we had people inside Iran that had rounded up the trucks for us to go in, and we would have a false cargo thing we would hide behind, and we had Farsi speakers. We had some of the guys, you know, from different other services that could speak Farsi would be our drivers. And then we would pull up to the outside of the embassy walls. We had ladders with knotted ropes on the end. We'd set the ladders up. We would go over and climb down these knotted ropes over the embassy walls and go to our sectors. So we had a wall built at the stockade, and every day we had to kit out and practice going over the wall at the stockade when we were there. We had a wall built at different other places to always practice going over the wall. And so that was the plan. We got to Desert 1. Well, we, of course, had the big thing was the desert, the sandstorm, the habu. This time of year, they were common, created from thunderstorms. I don't know why people didn't know about habus and weren't briefed on habus and what to do with habus, but somehow that was, the Marines never knew anything about it. When, as we flew in, and as on the fixed wing, I was on the lead MC-130. When we saw the sandstorms, the the fixed wing aircraft just flew on top of the habus. We were going in at low level to avoid radar. And, but with a habu, the sandstorm, that obscures radar. So you can fly above it and still not be detected. But the helicopters, instead of flying above it, were flying in the habu. They were trying to maintain low altitude. And we did not have secure communications with the helicopters to tell the helicopters, hey, there's what to do. There's a habu, get on top of the helicopters. And they just kept flying into it instead of getting on top of it. They did have secure radios, the helicopters did. But in order to use the secure comms, they would have to land the helicopter, go out and set up the SATCOM radio. You'd have to get your compass out and get the right elevation and azimuth. Back then, you had to do that. Nowadays, of course, you have satellite communications in your helicopters and your fixed wing. But back then, you had to actually land and set everything up. So what happened was one helicopter turned back, had some kind of problem. And I think it was an overheating problem, some component. It turned back to the aircraft carrier. Another helicopter had a blade indicator malfunction light come on. And so when you're flying Marine helicopters and you have a blade indicator light come on, you got to land immediately with that helicopter. You're flying a Marine 53. But if you're flying a Navy 53, you don't have to. They're different, but the Marines weren't aware of that, so they landed one of the helicopters and actually abandoned it. Another helicopter picked up that crew, and they abandoned it. So instead of 8 helicopters, now we have got six helicopters. And so when we landed at Desert 1, well, first thing happened when we landed at Desert 1, we saw lights down on the road down below, which was nobody was supposed to be down on the road. So we had to circle around a few times until the traffic cleared out. And then when we landed and opened up the doors, here's headlights coming down the road. And it was a bus carrying 44 Iranians. And Beckwith said, stop that bus. And so somebody shot a 40 millimeter round in front of that bus, and the bus came to a stop, and we boarded the bus, and we had 44 Iranian detainees that we don't, as Americans, we don't take hostages. We we have detainees.
Yeah, of course.
So we had 44 Iranian detainees of our own. And then, of course, the Ranger blocking team went out, and here comes a fuel truck coming down the road. So the Rangers fire a 66 millimeter law. It lands underneath the truck and detonates. And next thing we know, and the guy in the truck gets out and takes off. There's another truck vehicle behind it. And so that truck's kind of burning in there. So this is, and as we're landing, the fixed wings were coming in, and still no sign of the helicopters. And the helicopters came in really late, and there was 6 of them instead of the 8. And you could look at the pilot's face and the crew, that they were whipped. They had gone through 2 sandstorms, and they just were exhausted. And so then we had another helicopter that developed a hydraulic problem, and so which couldn't be fixed right away. And so now we're down to 5 helicopters. 5 is the very minimum number that we could do the mission and get the hostages and the rescue force out. If we lost another helicopter, somebody would have to stay behind. We'd get the hostages out, but some of us would have to stay behind. And and we figured that we would lose another helicopter when they went to their hide site for that night. Maybe one wouldn't start up for some reason in the morning, and then we'd be down to 4. So we had practiced. E&E was a big part of our plan. We had E&E kits sewed into our jackets. We were all carrying $10,000. We had $5,000 in Iranian money, $5,000 in American money, and maps and everything. We all had our E&E plans, and they were all recorded how we would E&E out of country. We had classes by the agency on how to steal cars, how to hotwire cars. We had hotwire kits and what cars are the best cars to steal. And at that time, there was a lot of Iranians that supported the U.S. in country, so we could get a lot of support. And we're hoping to link up with the Kurds to get to Turkey. We would have to E&E out to Turkey.
So did everybody have their own individual E&E route? Like it was.
Yes, the teams would be going to. Each team had their own E&E plan, in which we had filed how we would E&E out of country, and that was a big part of our plan. Personally, we thought the plan would go together. We would get to the embassy, we would do our job at the embassy, get the hostages. Then we'd go across the street to the stadium, a soccer stadium, and that's where the helicopters would come in. And we'd at least get the hostages out. But we thought that the helicopters would get lost around Tehran, a big city. Not all of them would show up and stuff like that. We did have some AC-130 gunships that would have been up overhead protecting us while we were there. Yeah.
But none of it really mattered. I mean, at the end of the day, anything that could go wrong went wrong.
Yeah, so the decision was made to abort the mission. Colonel Beth Peckwith made the decision that we couldn't afford, but we were still going to try to redo the mission at some other date. We were going to take the Iranians, detainees. We were going to take them with us, and they'd be released later, and try to redo this whole thing again. But so what happened was we got on B Squadron, we all got on this one EC-130, the Bladderbird, and we were going to go out. We were, because of the helicopters were late, the fixed wing were critically low on fuel at this time. So we needed to get the fixed wing, and helicopters are all filled up. So we need to get the fixed wings out first, and then the helicopters would go back to the carrier Nimitz. So we had two helicopters behind us, and the CCT was going to move the helicopters out of our way because our prop wash was going to bring dirt on the helicopter. So they moved the helicopters out of our way. The one on our left rear, when it landed, it flattened its tires. It landed hard, so it had flat tires. So it could not taxi away. So it had to lift up. So as it lifted up, dust kicked up and stuff. The pilot got vertigo, came around, and he actually crashed into the front cockpit of our aircraft. We're inside, and we felt the rocking motion, and you could see the rotor blades cutting into the top of the fuselage. But we really did not have an idea that those were rotor blades, what was really happening, that a helicopter just hit us. Then the next thing I know is the left front cockpit door blows in, and nothing but a fireball comes in. What had exploded was the helicopters had a internal fuel tank, an extra fuel tank in the cargo compartment for their fuel, and that had ruptured and exploded in the crash. And that's why the 3 Marines crewmen in the back didn't survive. The pilot and co-pilot of the helicopter both escaped out of their hatches, but they had severe burns. They had second, third degree burns.
Oh, wow.
But they did escape out of the helicopter, and they were carried to the other aircraft that were there. And so what happened was when that door comes in, the big fireball comes in, and flames are now pretty much all up front. So somebody opened up the left rear paratrooper door. There was nothing but flames. That was the side the helicopter crashed on us. So there was nothing but flames there. So they closed that, and we opened up the right rear paratrooper door, and there was flames and intermittent flames. Now, in the initial fireball, when the spectators that were there, the other people that were there, when they witnessed the helicopter running into us, there was a huge fireball, and our aircraft, they said, disappeared in this fireball initially. So they thought both the helicopter and the fixed wing were totally gone. Then we just started piling out. Dave Cheney, Sergeant Major Cheney said, I heard him yell, "Don't panic." And everybody's just getting out through that door. And I was up near the front, and I did not think it was possible to actually make it to the door. The flames were everywhere. I thought that this was the end, that this was where I would die in that aircraft. And small arms were cooking off. And then when I got to the door, I drove through the door, got to my feet, and just started running away. I could hear hand grenades cooking off that we had. And then we had 6 red-eye missiles on board that aircraft. The red-eye, we had guys we had a red-eye crew from the 82nd for the red-eyes to provide security, for us at the Desert One site. And those red-eye missiles cooked off, and they were shooting out into the desert, and aircraft were just moving away from us. They were now all aircraft is in motion trying to get away from this fireball and this ammunition blowing up and stuff like that. So initially, aircraft I went to, they waved us away. They were moving away. So I eventually went to another EC-130 and got on that one. And there was the pilot was already on the back of the aircraft. And immediately I could see the pilot was in distress, and he was having difficulty breathing. He was in a lot of pain. And so he had a nylon cord around his neck that was melted into his neck. So I cut that and get the cord out of his way, helped him. And he had inhaled some of the fumes, hot gases and stuff like that. And so we had the pilot and co-pilot on board. And for the 4-hour trip back, I kept the pilot, comfortable as much as we could, and till we got back to Marceria. And so when we did take off out of there, we hit the berm on the road. And next thing you know, we're up and hit that berm and hit it hard and up in the air and back down again. And then we finally get lift off, and they come on the comms on the aircraft and said that we may have damaged our landing gear, so we may not have any good landing gear when we land. And then as we're flying back to Oman, come on and says, well, we might not have enough fuel, so we may have to ditch at sea. So anyway, we made it back to Oman. And then when we got there, then we had got everybody together. We did roll call and grouped up. And then from there, we got on to 2 C-141s and flew back to Wadi Kenya in Egypt, which that was our forward staging base, was Wadi Kenya in Egypt.
Man, you know, when the story started and you said, "Oh, we didn't have accountability," you know, it's easy to fall into the trap of, you know, Monday morning quarterbacking and saying, "Wow, you know, that's like number one, right?" Like in combat operations, knowing where your guys are, who's there, where they are at all times. Accountability is king. That's pure pandemonium. That was, I mean, plus you are in a very, very denied territory. Like it's not just denied territory. Like, okay, we are in a place that we really should not be right now. So that's shocking to me. And when you guys got back and you got accountability, everybody was there besides the KIAs.
Yes. Well, I'm glad we did not leave anybody alive behind.
Good God. That's harrowing. I mean, that's the definition of a harrowing tale. That's incredible. And that's a serious baptism by fire for a brand new unit that was stood up. We knew we had rehearsed our mission. My team's mission was, once we got into the compound, we would go through the back door of the ambassador residence, through the kitchen door. We had big, huge models of this, and we practiced it all over. We'd go up the stairwell to the second floor. So my team's responsibility was the second floor of the ambassador residence, where we thought there'd be some hostages there. And then what we would do is the team leader and myself, we would go all the way up to the roof of the ambassador residence. We had a rope with us. We go to the edge and we'd throw the rope down, and where some of the guys were carrying M72 laws, and they would stack the laws up at the bottom of the building, and Lieutenant Colonel Bucky Burris would then tie up the laws to our rope, and we'd pull the laws up to the roof. So the team leader and I were doing an overwatch on the roof of the ambassador residence to the main gate down below, in case the Iranians reinforcements came through the front gate. We had several laws up there with us. That was our mission. That's incredible. My God. So, all right. So Eagle Claw is a bust. Just everything that could go wrong went wrong. The next big chapter of your career that I want to talk about is Urgent Fury.
Uh-huh.
And everybody knows Grenada because the Rangers love to talk about Grenada. They love it. So again, like that's part of that history that we don't know. We sort of do, but not really know. Like, where does Delta play into this? You know, everybody, yeah, the Rangers love to sing their running cadences about jumping into Grenada and dying, and you know, taking their M60s and things like that. But you know, at least personally, what was Delta Force's mission in Grenada?
Well, I watched the Rangers jump in at Salina Airfield. I was on the ground. So I didn't watch the first batch come in, but we were watching the second group coming in. Okay, Grenada. Well, after Desert One, I want to make one point after Desert One. That when they did the Holloway investigation, of what went wrong with that at Eagle Claw, formed up JSOC, Joint Special Operations, was formed up to unify all these different, Air Force, Navy, Marines, everything. So JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, was established following Eagle Claw. And the same thing happened after Urgent Fury. U.S. SOCOM was formed up based on what went wrong on Grenada. So these are two major organizations that were formed up after these two operations.
Was E Squadron or back?
Yeah, we had E Squad.
Sea Spray, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Was that formed because of Eagle Claw? Like,
yes,
to have your own. Okay, so to have your own aviators.
Yeah, that was kind of a secret.
Yeah, back then. Yeah.
Yeah, back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our mission in Grenada, again, we were out doing mountain training in Washington State when we got the word that to come back. We didn't know why, but we got the call to come back to Fort Bragg. So we had to fly back to Fort Bragg. And then when we got to Bragg, we was told that we were getting ready to invade Grenada. And a lot of people never even heard of Grenada. Why even we were invading Grenada? We had a short time to prepare for that. I was with B Squadron, and our mission was the Richmond Hill prison. The political prisoners, when they had the coup, they put the political prisoners in the prison at Richmond Hill. So our mission was the first mission to go, Richmond Hill prison. And then A Squadron had the Fort Rupert, was supposed to secure Fort Rupert. And so we actually had 8 helicopters that we launched. And this was the first time we used Black Hawk helicopters. We started training with Black Hawks, and so we had 8 Black Hawk helicopters that we were going in. And we were supposed to go into the prison just before first light. And we're going to fast rope in. This fast rope is the first time that we're going to be using fast ropes. We trained with fast ropes, and I wrote the SOP on how to use the fast ropes when we first got them.
Really?
My climbing back, yeah, because I have my climbing background.
Okay.
I instructed rock climbing and mountain climbing, and in the unit, and guided different trips. And so I was a professional member of the American Mountain Guides Association. So I did that besides demo stuff. And so I came up with the SOP, worked on the SOP for the fast rope. And so our team was going to land outside of the prison where the guards were and secure the guard barracks. So we had 8 helicopters. Delta B Squadron was in the first 6 helicopters, and in the second 2 helicopters was SEAL Team 6. So, and we were supposed to go in before first light. Well, things got delayed. So now we're going in daylight. And as we're going over the water, we could monitor Radio Grenada. And we could hear that the American invasion of Grenada had begun, for people to grab their rifles and go to the beaches and meet the Americans. So as we went over the beach, there's people out on the beach waving, but you could hear pop. You could hear pop, pop. Somebody's shooting. And then we go there. So the last 2 helicopters, 7 and 8, with the SEAL Team 6. Their mission was the British, what do you call, British consul. I'm trying to think of the term.
Consul General, the consulate.
Yeah, the residence. So
okay.
He's under house arrest. The British Consul General is under house arrest. They're to go there, and his name's Schoon, and they were to secure his residence and secure his freedom. That's what the SEALs mission was. They had that mission, and they also had the radio station mission to take out the radio station. And so as we flew in to Richmond Hill Prison, above, higher than Richmond Hill Prison is a fort, and that's Fort Frederick, and it's on higher ground above the prison. And as we was coming, 6 helicopters coming in, they started shooting at us from Fort Frederick. They had ZSU-23s set up there, so they were hitting us with 23 millimeter, 12.7, 51 cal, and 7.62. So we were getting, so as we come in, our door gunner immediately gets, I'm in helicopter number 5. Our door gunner on the left side gets shot, and we're so crowded in there. We could not move. Nobody could even get over to take the door gunner's place. And so we were just hovering over our positions and just getting shot at. And then people came out from the prison, and then they were shooting at us from down below, and rounds were going through the bottom of the helicopter. There was a toolbox there. So I went and sat on a toolbox just so I didn't try to not get shot in the butt. So we're hovering there. All we want to do we cannot really return fire, and we have no protection. We don't have any AC-130s. And we don't have any fast movers up in the sky to call in to take out that thing. And I don't know why we didn't have that support. So anyway, we're hovering there, and at that also helicopter number 4 in front of us, the pilot is mortally wounded, gets shot, and they go down and they crash. Helicopter 4 crashes into the jungle. And then we move off the target area and we do a big circle, and then we come back in to try to go into land again the second time around. Again, as we come back in, the fire is really intense, the shooting and stuff, and all we want to do is get the fast ropes out and get on the ground so we can fight, because you can't really fight from the air. And then we pull on off, and then we land on a hill just above Salinas Airfield there. And then as we land there, we were seeing that watching the Rangers come in and jump on the airfield. And they checked the helicopters out, and of all the helicopters we have, 5 helicopters, only 1 is in condition to fly again. We had self-sealing tanks and stuff like that, and those tanks even get hit with a 23 millimeter, which they weren't designed to do, still sealed. But we got 1 helicopter, so we put 2 teams on that helicopter, and we went, and I was part of that, and we went back where the 4th, the helicopter number 4 had crashed. So we went to the crash site, and so we secured the crash site there, and they brought a medevac helicopter off one of the Navy ships to pick up all of the wounded on board that, and the pilot was killed. So we flew them off to the USS Mossberger. It's a frigate that was off the coast for medical treatment. And then we went back to the airfield. And we just waited there, and we were getting ready to do a ground attack on Fort Frederick, Richmond Hill Prison. We were going to back up to the Richmond Hill Prison and get the political prisoners. But that time we got the word that they had released all the political prisoners. So that was the end of our mission. Then of course the 82nd came in, and I think it was Colonel Potter, or was he general at the time? He knew that we were there, and he was with the 82nd at that time. He was earlier, during Eagle Claw, he was with the unit. And he wanted the EOD folks in our team to support the 82nd for booby traps and stuff like that. And we were agreeable, but they wouldn't release us to support the 82nd, the EOD folks. So once that was over, we waited for a C-141 and flew out. That was the end of our mission. A Squadron didn't do their mission because the helicopters that they were going to use our helicopters, and they were all shot up.
Man.
So, yeah, there was a lot of resistance, the Cubans and the Grenadians, I think more than what people expected. I heard a story, I can never prove it, but I believe it's true, that the Cubans were notified of the mission ahead of time by State Department, and that they encouraged the Cubans on the island that we were going to not resist the Americans because we're coming in. I think they were totally ready for us, and I believe that's a true story.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, manned and armed anti-aircraft artillery ready to go as soon as you guys went feet dry on the birds. Like it makes sense.
Yeah, ZSU 23 set up overwatching the prison.
I mean, that's good God. And if you guys don't know, it's a nasty piece of Soviet technology. Think, they got the ZSU 2s and ZSU 4s, and it's just massive 23 millimeter guns, all mounted, either side by side with the 2s or in quads with the 4s.
Yeah,
and they're fast firing and they're accurate, and it's nasty business.
Yeah, these were manually controlled, manually fired, and I tell you, if we had the old Huey helicopters, all six helicopters, if we had Hueys instead of the Blackhawks, there would have been 6 Hueys on the ground because we got shot up that bad. Let's see. At the time, Colonel Boykin, now Lieutenant General Boykin, retired. He had a SATCOM radio on his back. He got hit with a 23 millimeter round in the SATCOM radio, and which took most of the blast, but he lost some of it, the muscle area of his arm from that. But he took a 23 millimeter round in the SATCOM radio.
If anything, that just goes to show how massive and cumbersome and heavy those radios were back then.
Yeah, they were.
Eating up anti-aircraft around and saves his life.
Yeah.
Again, that's incredible. So
yeah, we had some people like John Ginniff. He was in the crash helicopter. He was medically discharged from back injury. We lost several people. We had, I think, 19 wounded.
Good God.
We had no fatalities, but we had 19 wounded.
And how many operators were on that mission?
Oh gosh, it was B Squadron. If I had to guess how many we had in there, 25 to 30.
And 19 were injured.
Yeah.
Good God.
Yeah, and some of them were hurt pretty bad, but quickly got everybody out off to those Navy ships that were offshore for medical treatment.
Well, I mean, at least the medical PACE plan was in place. It's probably saved a couple lives, honestly.
Yeah. I know Don Breer got shot, and first he got shot in the foot, so he went up and reached down and pick his foot up, and then he got shot in the stomach, and that would have been and he survived and continued on in Delta, but otherwise, yeah, it could have been serious if we didn't have medical attention.
Man, so after Urgent Fury, did you return back to the conventional side, or were you assigned as like an advisor? Because I know you went up to Fort Richardson.
Yeah, I was at E7, and I'm still got my MOS. At the time, EOD was 55 Delta. Today it's 89 Delta. They changed all the MOSs around. But I was still, for duty, I was an 11B position, duty position. But my primary MOS was EOD. And I figured in order to be competitive, and I was E7 trying to make E8, I needed to go back to a conventional unit and do time as being an EOD supervisor. And this whole thing, this stuff was pretty hard on families. A lot of times my wife had no idea where I was, what I was doing, when I'd get back. Had wife, 2 kids, small kids. And I figured there's time to take break, go back to an EOD unit and to be competitive for promotion. So I could pick my assignments. So of course I picked Alaska. So I went back as the supervisor of the 176 Ordnance Detachment EOD there at Fort Richardson, which was really great. And but then at EOD work in the wintertime in Alaska, we don't do much work, just train because everything's covered with snow. So all the ranges are covered with snow. And so in January, Bucky Burris calls me up and says, "Hey, Mike, could you come back to the unit, TDY, and help set up an EOD cell in the unit, a regular EOD cell?" So I said, sure, nothing was going on. So I came back to the unit, and what I did was we interviewed EOD folks. So instead of having EOD people as operators, we would have a direct support cell of EOD folks, just like we had a direct support medical cell, we had a direct support commo cell, we'd have an EOD cell that was direct support that they would go through certain portions of OTC. They wouldn't do the CQB stuff. When there was CQB time, they would do advanced EOD training, and we'd set up a cell because we had lost our EOD folks. At that time when I went back to the unit, there was only, I guess just 2 EOD folks still left in the unit at that time. And so I set up interviewed, set up a EOD. So initially we recruited 6 people for the EOD cell. Today, the EOD cell at the unit is a lot bigger than 6. But so they were direct support, and they would be signed to a squadron, 2 EOD techs per squadron at the time, and to do that. So I went back and did that, and then Bucky just said, "Well, could you just come on back?" And I says, "Well, I'd have to wait till the kids get out of school in Alaska and stuff like that." So I figured I'd just come back to the unit. I did my time in Alaska, I had my fun in Alaska, and so I came back to the unit in June of '86. So I came back in there. First, I was in charge of the EOD cell. Then I moved into taking over research and development for the unit. So I was the sergeant major for that. And then I took over the breaching sergeant major, became the breaching sergeant major, and I was in a section called TEOR, was training and evaluation and operational research. So I was the master breacher, developing breaching charges for the unit. That was my thing. And then of course I made E8, and as soon as the day I made E8, I went down to our admin section, our S1, and said I wanted to transfer to the infantry, to the 11B. I knew I would never be competitive to make E9 in the EOD. We only had 13 E9 slots in the EOD. I had no school instructor time. I had no control detachment time. And so I figured I'd be more competitive with my background in infantry than in EOD. So they went down to S1, and I said, I want to transfer to the infantry. And they thought I was crazy. And they said, well, if you go to infantry, you got to go through infantry school. You can't just.
No.
Yeah, they told me I have to go through infantry school. And I says, Fort Benning. And I says, okay. I says, get me a school date for Fort Benning. I'll go through infantry school as a EA, do the CIB and all that, and I'll do it. And they put it in my paperwork in, and they said, you don't have to go there. But I tell you, Nick, I know a E7 that did the same thing and had to go to infantry school.
No way.
Yes, he did. He went down there. They had no idea what to do with him. So they just they didn't want him really with the students, these infantry students. So they just kept him separate. He did all the testing out stuff. And so they just said, okay, you're infantry. And so, but as an E7, he went through.
You can't do that. You can't put a guy in from the unit, CIB, all that. It's been in the Army for, God, if he's an E7, what, 12, 13, 14 years? And put him in with a bunch of 18-year-olds. My God, I can't imagine. I mean,
it would have been fun. I would have enjoyed it.
No, you would have spent all your time being inundated with questions from kids.
But so I put in for it, and I, of course, made E9 in infantry. But it did not change what I did at the unit. My job at the unit, I was still a master EOD. Master breacher, but then in I think it was '92, I went over to JSOC. I was still assigned to the unit, but for duty at JSOC. So from '92 to '96, I was the exercise sergeant major. We set up 4 of these JRTXs, these joint readiness training exercises. And so my job was to go out, select training sites for the exercise sites. And then I was usually the controller on the Ranger site. I always got the Ranger target and to be the safety controller on the Ranger target. So I did that. And then from there, I went to, they set up in JSOC, a J3 special plans cell. So I was the J3 special plans sergeant major until I retired, and my job was basically target defeat of hardened targets, which we would, like bunkers, deep underground bunkers, and different structures that were difficult to get in, ways of coming up ways to breach into these structures and to destroy them after we capture them. So that's what I did.
So kind of taking that, and I want to go back a little bit because you and I discussed it before I started recording. So kind of in that same realm of bunker busters and things like that, Desert Storm was the proving ground for this, for the Blue series of bombs, which were hardened penetrators. But this came up because I had asked you, and you're about to blow the internet's mind right now. Because the photo of the guy on Schwarzkopf's PSD, which has always been credited to being you,
right?
And the aesthetic inspiration for the legendary Sicario character Steve Forsing, which now people combine, myself included, you and Steve Forsing, and that's not you.
That's not me.
Oh man.
I wasn't on the security protection detail for Schwarzkopf. We had people from Delta that did that, and the person that's on that people claim to be me is a good friend of mine, unit member. That's Bill Cronin. Bill's a little bit taller than me. He had dark hair, he wore glasses, but that's Bill Cronin.
Man,
not me.
Not you, but you were involved with that developing like those the bunker busters, and you had started talking a little bit about the GBU-28, which I'd never heard of. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
I have a lot. I can send you a lot of information, Nick, on the GBU-28. It's a great story. There was two bunkers that we were interested in Iraq during Desert Storm. One of them was at Salmon Pack. The Salmon Pack area is a Iraqi chemical and bio facility, and there was a particular bunker there at Salmon Pack that believed to have chemical munitions in it, and we wanted to destroy that. So we were trying to develop a way of to destroy that bunker and to destroy the chemical munitions that was, with using thermal heat and stuff to develop a bomb that would be like a thermobaric type bomb to destroy that. But then it was also, we might have to go in there on the ground to take that facility if we couldn't take it out by air. And the other facility that we were interested in was Taji number 2. Taji number 2 is a command and control facility outside of Baghdad. It's a 2-story cut and cover facility. And so they dug a big hole in the ground. They built a huge 2-story structure in there, covered it back up. They poured a huge concrete bursting slab on top of that, and then they covered that up. So it had a bursting slab. It was an elaborate facility. Right at the beginning of the war, the Air Force dropped 60 Blue 109s, Blue standing for Bomb Live Unit 109s, which is a 2,000-pound bomb built out of special steel. It was our at the time, it was our bunker buster bomb, but it was only 2,000 pounds. They dropped 60 on the facility. You can see the craters on the facility. They did not damage the facility, did not take it out of operation. They did nothing to the facility as far as we could determine. So we were going to have to do a ground assault on that. And we knew a lot about the facility. We had satellite imagery as it was being built. The Swiss company was involved in it. We got blueprints. We got a lot of information. We knew quite a bit about the 2-story cut and cover facility. But it was going to be a Ranger Battalion mission. And then there'd be 2 of us breachers from Delta that would go on with the Rangers. And I would take a small Ranger team, train them to be my breachers, my assistant breachers, and another guy would do that. And we would tack 2 of those bunker bomb blast doors. He would do one, I would do one, and gain entry into the facility. The Rangers would take the facility out, and then we would destroy the facility. So that was a mission that I was working on. Instead of doing Schwarzkopf protection, I was involved in taking out this underground. And I thought, this is a great mission. But, we had not a capability to take this out. Well, the only thing that we had that you could, at the time, to take it out was a B-61, which nuclear. Is, B-61? It's a nuclear bomb. So this is in theory, this is a target that we would take that would be a typical target for a B-61, a nuclear bomb. Well, we're not going to start using nuclear bombs taking out targets in Iraq and starting that conversation. So we did not have a way to take it out. Initially, I had to brief, General Steiner came, and I had to brief him on the mission. He came down there. He was SOCOM General Carl Steiner at the time. And I started out the briefing to General Steiner. I says, if you roll back time, and today is 1945, that bunker would have been gone. In 1945, we could take that out, and today we cannot take it out. And since in 1945, there was 2 bombs. We had the 12,000-pound tall boy bomb, and we had the 22,000-pound Grand Slam bomb. These are British bombs. They were actually cast here in the United States, sent over by ship to Britain. They were filled up. These were what you call your dam buster type bombs. They were Brits were flying specially modified land casters, and they were taking out submarine pins, these submarine pins sometimes they had 10 meters of reinforced concrete, and these bombs were taking those out, the 12,000. And we took out railroad tunnels, we took out aqueducts, and we took out some dams. We had a special dam buster bomb too during the Brits did, but we had those. And then shortly after the war, we developed the T-12 bomb. Have you ever heard of the T-12 bomb?
I have not.
The T-12 bomb is a 43,000-pound conventional bomb, and we developed the T-12 bomb, and I at the time I knew of two of them that were still in existence, and we dropped these out in the deserts in Western California and tested them out. The T-12, when we tested the T-12 bomb, we dropped them from a modified B-28 bomber, but they were actually going to be used in the B-36s, you know, so we did have these. I forget how many we made, like 60 of the T-12 bombs. And at the time, there was two of them I knew in existence, and I told General Steiner we could fill them up and then drop those bombs. One was at Eglin Air Force Base at the Armament Museum in Eglin, out in front. Laying horizontally is a T-12 bomb. Have you ever been to Eglin?
I have.
Yeah, at the Armament Museum.
I was training. I didn't have time to sightsee.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, that's a great. If you're ever down there, go to the Armament Museum at Eglin Air Force Base. It's really good. And so I said, one's there. One of them's standing on its nose at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, and like that. I says, you know. But what happened was somewhere along the line, these type targets became tactical nuke targets, and we didn't develop a capability to take them out. But what happened was there was this officer in New York, and I forget where he was, but they had a stockpile of 8-inch gun barrels just laying around. And this officer, you know, wondered if he could just turn one of those 8-inch gun barrels into a bomb, you know, put a nose cap on it, throw some fins on it, put a guidance unit on it, and create a bomb out of it. And they did it in 28 days. So it became known as the GBU-28. From the first time they test dropped them in Eglin, out at Eglin Air Force Base, the GBU-28s. So they weighed about 4,200 pounds now, these bombs. So they had two of them. So they had two F-111s. This is the last day of the war. Two F-111s. They had one GBU-28 on one wing, two 2,000-pound bombs on the other wing just to counterbalance it. And they flew it into the Taji No. 2 thing. The first aircraft comes in, and he launches his GBU-28, and it misses the target. And the second one comes around, and drops its GBU-28, and I've seen the film footage. It comes in, it goes top dead center into the bunker, goes down into the bunker. And next thing you know, you feel the explosion. You see these bomb blast doors just blow off into the desert. And it took it out on the last day of the war, the GBU-28. It's an amazing story.
That is. And that's some serious
ingenuity. To develop a bomb that quick.
That's some serious ingenuity. We're going to take old 8-inch gun barrels. we're gonna strap some fins and a nose cone with a fuse, and we're gonna slap a JDAM unit on it to provide some guidance. And that's what got done. Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah, and it's known as the Sodomsizer. That's what it was called. Of course, now we have the Moab, the massive ordnance air blast bomb, or the mother of all bombs, and we have the MOP too today, which is the massive ordnance penetrator.
Yes.
So, are you familiar with the MOP?
I am. I've never seen one in person. I really enjoy the photos of it being strapped to the bottom of a B-52 because it doesn't fit into the bomb bay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Moab was dropped out of the back of a C-130. That was the only way.
just like the old 15,000-pound bombs we used in Vietnam, which people called them the daisy cutters, but in Vietnam they were called the cheeseburgers because we already had daisy cutters. There was a 10,000-pound. I forget the nomenclature of it, but we had in the first part of the war, we had 10,000-pound bombs that we called daisy cutters. These were left over from World War II. We had these bombs in World War II, these 10,000-pound bombs. And so they were the daisy cutters. And then it came out with the 15,000-pound, the blue 83s. And we called them the cheeseburgers. I don't know how I got the name cheeseburger, but it's filled with basically ammonia nitrate and propane. So we used those. We used those quite a bit during the Cambodian incursion to make helicopter landing zones. So they had a long extended nose fuse. They would drop off the back end of a C-130 and parachute drone, the drogue chute to keep them going with the right direction. They would land, they would blow the jungle away, and then it was instant HLZ, but then you had to send engineers in because it was impenetrable to get out of it because all the debris and stuff was piled up along the edges. So engineers had to come in with big, huge saws to cut their way out. But and the last time they used one was in Afghanistan. And so the stockpile, the blue 83s, 15 are gone. If you want to see one, there's only one in existence today, and that's at the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, so really? That's not too far from me.
Yeah, so they have one. I know the guy who was responsible of saving the last one to put in a museum. Otherwise, they'd all be gone. So that's for that. If you want to see one of those,
that is an amazing piece of history. Hold on 1 second. I apologize. Oh man, sorry about that. Thought I had that taken care of, but that's an incredible piece of history, Sergeant Major. That's again, like these are stories that you don't hear about. I heard a few stories when I went through SOTAC out at Yuma. You hear some stories about daisy cutters. Well, the blue 83s of what we knew, what's known in common vernacular. About the massive ordnance penetrator, and the Moab was dropped. That was right after my last deployment with 5th Group. They dropped that, and that the JTAC that got to call it in, he had a big chip on his shoulder after that because he had dropped the largest bomb in the United States inventory. So good for him. I'm not jealous. I'm not jealous at all.
Yeah.
But, well, Sergeant Major, it is an absolute pleasure talking to you. I don't want to keep you too long. This was incredible. I've said it once. I've said it a million times. The whole reason I do these is to hear stories that you don't hear. And you've shared, half a dozen, the details that nobody ever knows. So I can't thank you enough. Thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome, Nick.
I know everybody's really excited to hear this. So, guys, if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, the whole shindig. If you guys are listening on Spotify or iTunes, do me a favor and give me a 5-star review. We can keep doing interviews like this because that gives me a little bit of clout. Because I've said it, I'm the world's most okayest Green Beret, so I don't have a whole lot of clout in these parts. But if we want to hear from people who aren't okay, like Sergeant Major here, that goes a long way. So once again, Sergeant Major, thank you so much, and take care.
Okay. I'll send you some information you'll be interested in.
Please do.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Sergeant Major.
You're welcome.
Sorry, assholes, your quiet day at the office is about to get severely fucked up.
Guys, welcome back to the After Action Review. You know me, I'm Nick Guy, the world's most okayest Green Beret. And as usual, we have more than okay guests on. Joining us is Chief Warrant Officer Mike Durant. You guys are excited to hear his story. I know you guys, there's a lot of hype following this, but you guys know his story. You've seen the movie Black Hawk Down. Hopefully you've read the book by Mark Bowden. But the story kind of ends with Mike being captured. And I think this is a really good opportunity to kind of hear that story in captivity. It's something that's rare nowadays in modern combat, modern warfare. You don't really see a whole lot of POWs. So when you get a chance to speak with one, you take the opportunity. So Chief, thank you so much for joining us.
Nick, my pleasure.
So, I mean, kind of just, let's take it from the beginning, like just the shoot down. I mean, what happened? How did you find yourself in that situation?
Yeah, so obviously the battle had progressed pretty significantly by the time we rolled back in. We dropped our chalk of Rangers off. I was the flight lead of the Ranger blocking force, and we had put our 4 aircraft in, dropped our customers off, and we were holding north of the city. And at that point, theoretically, my job was done because we were going to extract largely using ground vehicles. So we were essentially a contingency asset at that point. And then Super 6-1 got shot down, and the commander called me and wanted me to replace them over the target. And the aircraft was being used as a sniper / close-in fire support platform. In hindsight, probably not a good idea, but it had been effective up to that point, and it was really only on that mission where it became obvious that this is a little bit too high risk in a urban environment like that. But anyway, I flew in, replacing 6-1, got into orbit, and we didn't have snipers on board, so we were going to use our miniguns. And that to shoot a minigun in a close-in situation like that, you can't be flying fast. I mean, you got to be flying fairly slow so you can see what's happening in the alleyways and in between the buildings. So we're probably going 50 knots and in a very tight orbit with another Black Hawk Super 6-2. So there's 2 of us sort of 180 out from each other. And there was little birds up overhead, and still stuff happening all over the place. And we made it around the pattern about 3 times when we got hit by an RPG. And the initial impact, I always describe it as hitting a speed bump in a parking lot. If you go, over a speed bump at 25 miles an hour, and you feel that jolt in the car, that's what it felt like when the RPG hit the aircraft. We didn't see it hit us in the tail, and but knew obviously we didn't hit because it was that significant of a jar of the airframe. And I was flying, I rolled out, look around, do what pilots do, kind of looked at the instruments, made sure the thing was still flyable, and it was. Everything seemed normal. So my initial plan was to go back to the airfield because we're within really 3 minutes flight time of the airfield. I could see it. We just happened to be pointed straight at it. So I sort of set my sights on that, and within seconds, the tail rotor just disintegrated. And, that's a bad thing. Whether you're a helicopter pilot or not, I think you recognize we need those things on the aircraft. So when it came off, it was an e-ticket ride is an understatement. The tail rotor is supposed to keep the aircraft from spinning, and that low airspeeds in particular has a lot of authority over that. And we were at pretty low airspeed, as I talked about earlier. So the spin accelerated very, very rapidly and got to the point where we were spinning in a flat spin, completely out of control. And I couldn't really see anything other than the horizon line. So I was trying to keep the aircraft from flipping upside down while Ray Frank, who is my co-pilot, was shutting the engines off, because it seems counterintuitive, but the only thing you can do in that situation is actually kill the power, and that stops the spin. But then you fall from the sky, which is what we ended up doing, and somehow impacted on the wheels, and the wheels did their thing, landing gear did its thing, and we crashed very, very hard, a lot of G-forces, but everything worked as advertised, and we all survived.
So real quick, I just want to go right back real quick, just for my own personal edification. So when you guys were kind of operating as that, I mean, a close air asset. I mean, was somebody on the ground actually doing like Army call for fire, like aircraft call for fire or anything like that? Or was you seeing targets and engaging them just kind of on you? I mean, how's that work? Because I know like Apaches, they like, that call for fire platform, like gunships, things like that. But with Blackhawks, like you don't really see that. It's not like the Marine Corps that treats their Hueys as a cast platform, things like that. Was that on you guys, or were guys on the ground like literally giving you call for fire?
So the Blackhawks were not getting calls for fire. The Little Birds were, because they're up more in a traditional attack helicopter profile. And I'm sure they were engaging targets on their own, but I think for the most part, they were getting calls for fire. For us, it was, acquire, engage, and do it all on our own, because we were literally, if you had to measure the diameter of that orbit that we're in, it's probably, 300 yards maybe. I mean, it's a pretty tight circle.
Yeah.
Right around the target site. So we're actually shooting out from the target site with our outboard gun. So we're trying to keep the bad guys from penetrating the perimeter. So we'd almost be right over the heads of the blocking force, I guess, and going around and then providing fires outside of their sectors.
Okay, so kind of like a hasty IP sort of kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
I only asked because call for fire interests me. I'm a JTAC, so it kind of falls in line. But okay, so back to the story. I apologize for going off on a tangent, but all right. So you guys crashed. You were immobilized. You were injured in the crash.
Yeah, we were all injured pretty severely. I had broken femur, broken back. I was unconscious. Ray had a broken tibia and a back injury. I don't know the full extent of it. And the crew chiefs were hurt worse than that. The seats in the front are a little bit better from a crash survivability perspective than the seats in the back. And we don't even know for sure if they got locked in. I'm sure anybody that's ridden in the back of an assault aircraft knows the crew chiefs kind of move around a little bit and they're on monkey harnesses. And the way those work is, if you are going to crash, you're supposed to lock in, get back in your seat basically, and lock it in. I don't even know if they had a chance to do that. It was pretty violent.
Gotcha. All right. So you're on the ground. You guys are injured. I mean, at that point, this, like you had said, the battle has progressed. Like the city's now, everybody's involved in the fight now. How long until Shugart and Gordon were on scene when they were feet on the ground at the crash site?
To me, it seemed like seconds, but I think part of the explanation there is that I was unconscious for some unknown period of time. I think it's about 10 minutes. I mean, maybe less. It was pretty quick. I mean, I know the conversation went on between them and the leadership. Ultimately, as I understand it, General Garrison made the final call to put him in, or allow them to be put in. He didn't order it or mandate it. He basically gave the permission. And I think that all transpired over probably less than 10 minutes. Okay.
All right. So they reach the crash site and they pull you from the bird. So they pull everybody. That was kind of like one of those things, like everybody everybody sees the movie, things like that. I mean, how was that managed at the crash site? Getting the crew chiefs, your co-pilot, yourself out. I mean, it's not really covered anywhere else. So,
right. So Ray was able to get out on his own. He, as I said, he had a tibia fracture, so he was somehow able to get himself out of the seat. And the last time I saw him, he was actually standing. I was in the right seat. He was in the left. He was standing there adjacent to the seat. We were flying doors off, so we didn't have to get the doors open. It just seems like only seconds later, Rainey and Gary arrived on my side first. And it was a bit of a shock, actually. I didn't expect anybody to be there that quick. And also didn't know there were only two. So my thoughts initially are, this is a rescue force. Somehow they diverted a group of assets here, and we must have crashed right next to them or something, And they were focused, as I've always said, purely on the mission and the task at hand. You know, there was no sense of, I mean, yeah, there's a sense of urgency, but certainly no sense of panic or anything that would cause me concern. I obviously felt like they're going to load me up in a vehicle and I'm out of here. You know, I mean, that's really the mindset that I had. And they put me on the ground. I had my MP5 already. They left me with that, and then they helped the crew chiefs out. I couldn't turn around, so I never saw the crew chiefs, but I could hear them. They were hurt bad. I mean, you could just tell by the sounds that they were probably both incapacitated. I think Tommy, who was on the left, was actually hit in the chest by his minigun. You know, they're on a swivel mount, a pintle mount, and there's a lot of movement that allows them to shoot. And then because of the way the aircraft hit the ground, I think his gun actually hit him right in the chest. And then Bill, I'm not sure, but he was hurt pretty bad also. And then from that point on, most of the activity at the crash site was going on the other side of the bird. And I might have thought about this. I could have shared a picture, but if you look at it from the air, there's a kind of an open area on the left side of the aircraft, and I was on the right side between the aircraft and a fence, basically, is corrugated tin wall, you could say. So the access to the site was really on the opposite side, which is fortunate for me because I've got the aircrafts essentially providing cover as the mob and the civilians and everybody else kind of approached from the left-hand side. So Randy and Gary were over there with Ray, doing what they could to keep the attackers at bay, but again, they were vastly outnumbered, and it was only a matter of minutes before they could not hold out any longer.
So at that point, so they were killed. I'm trying to put this together in my head. So you were alone. How far away were you from the crew chiefs? I know you couldn't see them because you couldn't turn around, but you ended up alone when the mob came in.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Tommy was probably, or Bill, I'm sorry, was probably only 5 feet behind me. I mean, he was, I'm sure they put him on the ground right behind me, but I was laying on my back on a survival kit or something. There's a great Dietz painting for some of the folks that might have been at the compound in Bragg, and it's hanging there, and I've got a copy of it. It's pretty accurate. It shows, I'm laying on something adjacent to my seat on the ground there, and we're doing what we can to hold people at bay. I didn't touch on it, but Gary actually is hit first, and I didn't see it, but I heard him say something, and I'd flown with these guys on the aircraft before, so I didn't know them well. I didn't know them personally, but I knew they were, and I recognized his voice. And then Randy came around and asked if there were any more weapons in the aircraft, and at that point, any sense of calm that I had or confidence in this being over with was gone. And good news is the crew chiefs put their weapons where they were supposed to be. He grabbed them both, and he came on and he gave me what I believe still is Gary's weapon. And it only had a partial magazine left, and I ended up firing a few rounds, and then it ran out of rounds. And at that point, Randy called on his radio for a status and was told, or I heard the response was that a reaction force was en route. So he went around the nose and he made his last stand, and within probably 2 or 3 minutes, he went down. I mean, the volume of fire is like, it was like being at small arms range. I've read reports from the Somalis that 27 Somalis were killed at Crash Site 2. So, I mean, that's at best 4 of us shooting. It's probably me accounting for 0 and Randy and Gary accounting for 27, but Ray may have got off a few rounds also. So, I mean, if you're killing that many people, that's a lot of freaking shooting.
That's an incredible amount of shooting, especially being totally outgunned there and exposed. I mean, there wasn't really cover and concealment out there.
Right.
I mean,
right.
When I read the book, it seemed like they were utilizing the aircraft as kind of their base of fire. whether or not that was accurate or not, I have no idea.
Yeah, well, again, I couldn't see it, but I don't know how it could be because they were on the opposite side of the bird, and that's where the attack was coming from. So they're essentially just making their last stand almost in the open, maybe behind a tree or something. But there's really nothing over there if you look at the overhead picture.
Gotcha. Well, God, and well, listen, I've had CAG dudes on before. Everybody knows who listens or watches this podcast knows the type of metal that they're capable of and that they're made of. But from there, so Randy and Gordon are killed. You're out of ammo. He handed you the rifle. You're dry. What happens next? Is it just a case of just the crowds totally convening on your location, or what?
Yeah, and they all came from the left. And again, it's easy to envision when you see the imagery from overhead. It's the access to that area is all from that side. So that's where the whole attack came from, and it was pretty frightening. I don't feel it anymore, but I can tell you at the time, I was certain that this is it. I mean, these people just killed everybody else at this crash site. They're overrunning the site, and I'm done. That's pretty much what was in my head. It wasn't so much giving up as just sort of a realization of this is just reality. I can't hide. I can't run. I got no ammo left. I did have my M9 was still in its holster, and I cannot explain, never have been able to, why I never even pulled it out. And you know what? It could be argued it would have just got me killed. I don't know, but it wasn't a conscious decision. It wasn't don't pull that out. It was, I just never even thought of it. I was just so focused on the submachine guns. But so when they came around the nose of the bird, which was the first time I saw them, they were surprised because I think they thought they had killed everyone. And I was laying there. I had Gary's weapon across my chest, and essentially resigned myself to the fact that they were going to just beat me to death. They had done some pretty horrific things to other people in the region, and didn't expect to be treated any differently. And then, I did think back about survival school, or what they taught us in survival school about this moment, which is basically, this is the moment where it goes from, this is not a fight anymore, this is survival, right?
Yes.
And I do distinctly remember making that decision that I'm now trying to survive. This is not a fight. The fight's over. And I didn't antagonize them. I didn't John Wayne and spit in their face. I just let it go. Played possum. And it probably saved my life because, at that point, everything's so volatile. No one's going to know if, they put a bullet in my head, after they ran over the site. I mean, there's no accountability for anything like that at that point. So I actually ended up helping them get my survival gear off because our gear at the time had clips on it like a water ski vest, right? And I've always made the joke that I didn't see any Somalis water skiing, so they probably don't know how that works. So I mean, they were pulling on it, and I finally just, hey, I got this, and I unclipped it. And the thing to remember is these people have absolutely nothing, so everything is valuable to them. I mean, we had kids in the field fighting over empty plastic water bottles. It was just, so everything that I had that any person in that group could get was, I don't want to go so far as to call it a treasure, but it had value, right? So, survival vest, night vision goggles, weapon, all of that stuff. So they're all clamoring for this stuff. And then there's a couple that are more interested in beating me to death. And they started to. They broke my nose, my cheekbone, my eye socket. And, again, I'm still thinking it's not likely I'm making it through this, but, there's nothing I can do but try to survive it. And eventually, and I actually get this information from Mark Bowden's research on Black Hawk Down. I don't remember this, but he says he interviewed a guy who fired rounds in the air and got everybody under control. And I honestly don't remember that. Now, maybe it's not true. I am not sure. But I can tell you that things did calm down and the beating stopped, and somehow, some way, they came to the realization that I was worth more to them alive than dead, and they stopped beating me. But they continued to rip all my gear off. And at some point, I think when they were pulling on my boot, my femur went out the backside of my leg, which was, again, a miracle that didn't create a more significant issue. And then they finally got everything off of me except for my T-shirt and my desert tan two-piece flight suit bottom. That's all I had left on. And that's when they threw dirt in my face and wrapped a rag around my head and said I was going to die there, and hoisted me up in the air and carried me out.
That's a really good indicator of, you were kind of talking about the whole machismo, don't spit. And it's funny because I literally have the Special Forces Creed hanging up. And there's a line that says, I pray that I may have the strength to spit upon my enemy. But everything you learn in SEER school is de-escalation. It's a survival game. There's no battle of wits. Look out for your mates if you're with your mates, but it's de-escalation. So that's a really good kind of, all right, here's the lore versus here it is in practice. You're beat to a pulp. You have a significant compound fracture, which to me, your femur sticking out the back of your leg, that's a life-threatening injury. The crowd, for whatever reason, calms down, and you're bagged, you're told you're going to die here, and you're taken away. So this is the part of the story that nobody knows. What happens afterwards? What is the captivity like? So where did they take you, and what happened from there?
So, and you're absolutely right. And had I never gone to survival school, I'm not sure what I would have done. I really don't know, and I have always said I appreciate the fact that I did have the opportunity to go to Sea Level SEER there at Bragg. And actually, I think at this point, there's only 2 of us that have actually gone through that school and been held. That may have changed. Last I knew, that was the case. So obviously they were interested in what I thought about the training. And I've always said it was part of why I survived. There's no question about it. And it does create that sort of discrepancy, I suppose, in who we identify ourselves as and then what we're taught to do. And I don't know how you reconcile that other than, once the fight's over, and you just gotta recognize that. And as long as you're not doing, like you said, which is, doing it for your own betterment at the cost of others, then you're still living, you're adhering to whatever ethos we all share.
Well, in that ethos, I think there's definitely room for interpretation, for sure. I mean, yeah, so long you don't want to give away any information. You don't want to provide the enemy any sort of propaganda value, things like that. These are all things that are taught at the Sea Level course. But again, like I said, that machismo, the alpha type, the 160th, the SF, the CAG, the Rangers, everybody that goes through that kind of thing, they all say, yes, I pray that I had the strength to spit upon my enemy. But in practice, it is 100% about survival. I find that absolutely fascinating because you are one of the few guys you're a SEER Level C graduate who actually went through it. Guys like me, when you go through the course, it's cerebral. It's not tangible. It's all cerebral. This is very much a what if scenario. And I mean, is it safe for me to assume when you went through the course that was your mindset too? Like, this is just it could happen, but it's such a rare chance of this, coming to fruition. Or did you go through the course and as an aviator, you were just like, that's a distinct possibility that I could be shot down and captured?
No, I don't know how everyone else felt, but I felt like there's no way this is ever going to happen to me.
Gotcha.
it's but not to say I didn't appreciate the training or really enjoy it. I always said it was probably outside of flight school, the second best training I ever went through. I really did. I thought it was great. But, all the stuff we learned in that short period of time, because, for me, I didn't go through the full Q course, or I didn't, go to Ranger school. So for me, that's my sort of moment to suffer like all the rest of you and hopefully become better as a result of it all. But anyway, so back to your question. So I, immediately following that being picked up and hoisted overhead moment, I've always described this very brief period of time where I actually felt like I was above looking down. And what does that mean? Well, the best explanation that I've ever had provided to me was the pain got so intense for me that my brain is trying to convince itself that this is not real. And it makes sense to me because I distinctly remembered it. And I also remembered it as though I'm an observer and not the person in the midst of all that madness. So if that is what happened, it worked. And I kind of wish it would have lasted for a little bit longer because, before I knew it, I was right back in the middle of it. But it was, you can imagine, femur fractures. You just watch them on a football field and you're like, ooh, it hurts you just to see it. And I can tell you that my femur didn't hurt anywhere near as much as my back did. And it was just excruciating. And, they don't care. They're just hauling me around like a rag doll. So it was pretty rough. And then I ended up getting, now again, this comes from Mark Bowden's interviews. He says that there was another group within the clan structure in Somalia that actually took me away from the original people who captured me. And these are rivals of Adid, okay? Now, again, I'm oblivious to all this at the time, but he says that Adid, when he found out that these people had me, then either paid a ransom or applied some kind of influence to ultimately get me back. So that accounts for a couple of moves. I ended up getting moved 3 times. And, the first one was, I only spent a few hours in this first place, and it was basically a tactical interrogation, right? You get these guys that they don't know how to interrogate. They don't know what they're doing. They're just basically, a pat down search and, a couple of threats, and they left me alone. And then I got thrown on the back of a flatbed truck. At least that's what it felt like. They always had a bag over my head, but it's like being on a metal flat bed, not like a pickup truck bed that's corrugated, but an actual flat piece of metal, and then like a tarp thrown over me. And then I got moved to where I would spend, I guess it would be maybe 2 or 3 days. And that was in this little octagonal building. We're thinking it's somewhere in the northeast part of the city. I don't think we ever really figured out for sure where some of these places were. But it was in the neighborhood because I could hear kids playing outside. But I was also very close to wherever the convoy traveled, because that night, after being put in this place, the convoy, which is actually trying to get to Super 6-1, comes right by my compound. And I'm thinking they've already figured out where I am. This is a rescue, because you can hear the gunshots and some of the larger projectiles. I can actually hear them flying through the air, right? And explosions all over the place. And I figured one of the observation birds tracked me with a sensor, and somehow they tracked me all the way to this location. And someone's going to bust through this door, and then the convoy just kind of passes by and keeps shooting, and the fires become distant again. It was incredible. The sort of elation or excitement or anxiety, all rolled into one, followed by disappointment, I guess, as it passed on by.
Oh my God. I can't imagine. That's horrifying. I did not know that was the case. That the ground extraction force literally rolled by your location.
And it was so close. Like, I'm sitting in my office in my house right now, it would be about the same distance to the street. Is how close it felt. Like they actually came right by. And again, just an interesting, trivial little coincidence, I suppose, that that would indicate maybe where I was. But anyhow, and then that first night goes by. They had chained me up. But otherwise they just tossed me on this concrete floor, and I was able to get out of the chain. And they didn't chain it real tight, and I was sweating, and so I was able to get out of the chains. And it was, I don't think it's too sensitive to talk about it. They talk about little victories, right? It was a little victory. I mean, it was, man, I can get the dirt out of my eyes. I can turn my leg so it's not, throbbing in pain quite as much. I can reposition myself, and oh yeah, I just got out of your chains, you idiots. It was one of those kind of moments, right? And it's sort of like at least the way the compound was set up, which I know is dramatically different now, but there was just gravel outside of your cell, and that's exactly the way it was here. And I could hear them when they came up. So I heard this gravel, and I wrapped that chain around my wrist again to make it look like I was still chained up. And the door opens, and bang, a round goes off, and it hits the floor. And then the round ends up in my left arm, and a piece of the concrete floor ends up in the backside of my broken femur leg, basically maybe 6 inches above where the femur came out. So I'm like, I don't want to make light of it, but when you get shot, it's kind of shocking that you've been shot, and you have to sort of reconcile it in your mind. And I looked down, and I could see the round is actually sticking out of my arm because all the velocity was gone after it hit the concrete. So I reached over and I grabbed it, and I burned the crap out of my fingers. And I've always kind of joked around about a lesson learned on that too, that rounds are hot. And if you are going to pull out your own bullet, you probably ought to give it a second or use some tweezers or something, because it burned the tips of my fingers when I grabbed it. But anyway, superficial wound, nothing really. Actually, the one on my leg was worse. There's still a scar there, but more psychological than anything else. No real threat to my life. And whoever it was I always said, a true coward. Didn't even show their face and ran off before they even saw what they'd failed to accomplish. And then the real guards came in after they heard the shooting, and they were like, what's going on? And I remember going like this, and I made like a gun and pointed at my arm and like, what's going on here? Can't you control your people or something like that? Sort of gesture. And they talked among themselves and just went the other way after they saw I wasn't hurt real bad. And then they started talking about making the video. And this is always the big test, I guess, or it's become more culturally part of who we are today. But again, this is 1993, so we're not quite so in tune at that point in history in the permanency of video. Right now, everyone gets it, right? I do selfies of myself in a compromising situation. It's never going away if I share that with somebody, right? So I think we have, as a culture, we understand. But then it's just a little bit different, is all I can say. But I still had this appreciation for the fact that this is a big deal, and how this gets handled is going to make a big difference, not just for me, but potentially the political situation, the tactical effort, everything, right? Because it's such power, the media and how these things are used. So again, I'm thinking back to survival school. What should I do here? And initially, I went with the approach of, I'm basically not going to say anything, right? I'm just going to, they can ask away, and I'll just play stupid. And then, it went on for a while, and they had a guy there with a camera, and you could tell they were getting impatient. I'm sitting up, so you can imagine it's not torture, but it's torturous to be holding your weight off of your spine when you have a compression fracture. And I finally got to the point where I was getting a little frustrated and thought, all right, I need to try plan B here. So I again thought about the way they taught us to respond to these questions, and I decided to apply the logic, and it worked flawlessly. I mean, it absolutely worked flawlessly. You know, the things that that I answered to were my name. Basically, everything that I said was written on my name tag. Right, my name tag had a picture of a Black Hawk helicopter. It's got my rank on there. It's got my name. I gave them that information. They said, you know, something about you Ranger, and I said I'm a Black Hawk pilot again, and all that's because they captured me laying next to a Black Hawk, right? I mean, you have to apply some logic here, you know, to say, you know, Black Hawk, what's a Black Hawk? You know, that would be kind of stupid. So I told them that, and then they were after really the political questions, which is where it gets a little more difficult to figure out, all right, how do I reconcile this? And the two things that they had been asking over and over and over were, you kill the people innocent, and then how you think this mission in Somalia. Those are their exact words. And I've replayed that video 500 times, so I know exactly what they said. And to the first question, where they said, you kill the people innocent, I said, innocent people being killed is not good. And then they said, how do you think this mission in Somalia? And I said, I'm a soldier, I do what I'm told. And that was it. And again, it was like I applied the lessons learned, the logic and the techniques that I've been trained to apply. And in this scenario, anyway, it worked absolutely flawlessly because they thought they had something. They had me talking on camera. They grabbed that video, ran out the door, and I'm told by CNN that they actually had the video in Atlanta within 15 minutes, and they broadcast it to 127 countries within like a half hour when it was shot, which is amazing when you think about when that was. And the one credit I'll give to CNN is that they called my parents and they said, hey, we have something, video evidence of your son's whereabouts. You know, we're giving you a heads up. It's going to air live in about 5 minutes. We just want you to know. And of course, obviously, they turned on the TV, and they had a heads up that it was coming, and still pretty painful to watch, I'm sure. But in the end, it ended up arguably being a life insurance policy for me because now everybody knew that I was alive. Everybody knew that they had me, and they were, whether they agreed that the Geneva Convention applies, they were going to be held to that standard either way. So it ended up, didn't feel like a good thing at the time, I can tell you honestly, but it ended up being a good thing.
So, I mean, at that point, was your family was informed by the Army that you were missing in action, I would assume?
Yes, all 6 of us, our families were, at that point, official status was MIA. Yep. Okay.
So the video released, obviously I can definitely see, because that is the worst case scenario in a POW experience. They turn the video camera on. It's either a gotcha moment. They want you to read a prepared statement, something like that. But in the end, it was just proof of life for the United States government. How did we go from, all right, I've been moved around a couple times, I'm injured, I'm now being used for potential political reasons, to your safe return back to U.S. forces?
Yeah, so after the video was shot, they moved me. There was actually a lot of people in the room for the video. You know, one thing I found, this is really dating myself, but there was a movie from the might have been the early 70s called "The Gods Must Be Crazy," where it's like somebody in an airplane throws a Coke bottle out the window, or so. I don't even remember the movie. I just remember the story about it. And there's a tribe on the ground that this bottle falls from, and it's, to them, it's like something from the gods, right? And I always felt that was sort of how I was looked at by the Somali people. You can imagine for them that the U.S. is this sort of distant, faraway land, and we're all almost aliens, right? We are so different from them. We have all this technology. We have all these things that they probably just see in bits and pieces, because you got to remember, internet really didn't even exist at the time. So, you know, what they know of us comes to them either through maybe a VHS movie or something like that, right? So to actually have an American in your living room is sort of a and a very, it's definitely an anomaly, but it's almost it creates a lot of interest and attention, which is definitely not something I would have really thought about. But no question, it was like everybody wanted to come see the American, right? So when they shot the video, there was a lot of people in there. It was kind of a big moment, and Indeed realized with all that attention, somebody's going to figure out that that's what's going on. So they moved me again right after the video was shot. And I didn't mention this yet, but I did write my own book, and I wrote my own book for exactly the reason that we're having this conversation. When I went to see Black Hawk Down, which I didn't go right away, but I finally did, I walked out of the theater thinking, man, I mean, the movie ends and I'm in captivity and no one knows what happened, right? So what better opportunity than this to write a book? And I had held off. I had actually written the outline to one, going all the way back to when it first happened. And then, I think one of the things we all do honor and respect is the fact that we don't talk a lot about operational stuff, at least not when we're in it. And that's part of why I didn't do it. But now, I mean, I'm retired. This has been 10 years. This stuff is not really operationally significant anymore. Mark already was given access to everything. They made a movie out of it. I could probably tell my part of the story, and not be considered persona non grata. So I felt like the time was right, and I did, and it was, the timing was right. It was very, very sought after project, and it became a New York Times bestseller itself, actually. And the title's In the Company of Heroes, and I chose that title because that is truly how I always felt when I was an operational guy, that, we are in the company of heroes. That's just who we served with. And I've always felt this is just a tremendous honor to have ever even served, never mind in combat and in situations like this specific one we're talking about. So that, if there's interest in learning more about this part of the story, it is I'm very proud of it. It's hard to find because we sold out a couple of printings, but it's available in all formats and from any of the usual locations. So I was moved again, and as I wrote in the book, this is one situation where I thought I had a chance to escape, and they had put me in the back seat of a car, threw a tarp over me again, and now you can imagine, I don't know, I'm sure there's many folks listening who have had pretty significant injuries. The thing about ortho injuries, at least my experience, and I've had a fair number through playing sports and this and all that, is that it doesn't seem to hurt right away, and it doesn't seem to hurt necessarily when you're not moving it. But as soon as you try to move anything related to that injury, the pain just absolutely spikes, right? So when I was in that first couple of days and they weren't moving me around, it actually was tolerable, even without pain medicine. But man, as soon as you start to manipulate it, either whether it's a result of the trauma, the swelling, or whatever, the pain was ridiculous. So when they stuffed me in this car, I was hyperventilating, and the sweat was probably projectile coming out of my body because the pain was so bad, and they threw this tarp over me, and then they actually sat on me because as they're driving through the city, they don't want people to suspect that there's something in this car, right? So they're trying to act like, it's just a bunch of thugs driving through the city. And when they got to the second location, which would actually be the third location at this point, they stopped and they all got out and they left me alone. Now, the first thought is they're leaving me to get killed here. I've served their purpose. They made the video. They're just abandoning this vehicle, and someone will find me and they're going to, I'm going to get killed here. So I'm trying to be quiet, and I'm kind of trying to assess the situation, and then thought about, okay, any chance they could have left the keys in the car, right? I don't know. So I start to kind of ease myself up, and my plan is I kind of feel like I'm in the northeast part of the city. If the keys are in the car, I'm going to start this damn thing and figure out how to drive it and just head southwest, right? That's my plan. Well, never got a chance to even try to get over the seat, and they got back in the car. Apparently they had gone ahead. I speculate that they just went to pre-coordinate access to this compound. We had to go through like a garage door gate kind of thing, and then get in there. And I guess they just wanted to go make sure everything was kosher before they went through. So I spent a few days there. I came up with a few more ideas there. I asked them to wash my shirt, and my reasoning was not for hygiene purposes, but I thought, all right, we got helicopters flying around. Maybe there's some remote chance they'll see this brown T-shirt hanging on a clothesline somewhere. Just anything you could come up with. Right. I do characterize myself as a problem solver. I'm always trying to come up with solutions. And, that was one. And I remembered, trying to exercise a little bit because, I don't know, am I going to be here 6 months? You don't know. And I'm completely immobilized. So I'm grabbing the windowsill and sort of pulling myself up, trying to get a little bit of elevation in my heart rate so I don't completely turn into jelly while I'm laying there, and just stuff like that. Try to eat and drink whatever they gave me. Again, they teach you that stuff in school. It's you got to eat and drink, remain hydrated to survive. And then over time, what the Somalis will describe as is what the Red Cross called the reverse Stockholm syndrome. So the Stockholm syndrome, if you're not familiar with it, is when you as a captive sympathize with your captors because they indoctrinate you. The reverse Stockholm syndrome, which I've never heard of any other time than this, is when your captors start to like you and sympathize with you. And that was not a strategy. All it was is an unintended consequence of doing what they taught us to do in survival school, which is just show general respect and courtesy, right? Again, maybe the curriculum's changed. It's been 30 years since I went, but, it goes back to our conversation earlier, but you don't spit in their face. They're Muslim. So when it was prayer time, they were praying right in the room with me, right? If I were, trying to play John, and I don't mean to pick on John Wayne, I respect the man and all his movies, but it's a reference we all get. If I wanted to play John Wayne, I could, say derogatory things during that prayer time, but that would hit them at their very core. So that is obviously not the right thing to do. And I was respectful and I was reverent and I let them pray. And then I was given a Bible from the Red Cross, and they thought I was actually studying the Bible as well. What they didn't know is I was actually using it as a diary, and I was keeping notes in it, and I still have it. And they let me leave with it. And they never knew that I was actually keeping a log, but I chronicled everything from the moment the RPG hit the aircraft all the way until I got released. And again, it was sort of playing off their, and I respect the fact that they're very faithful people, and they showed me that same respect in kind. And it goes back to what you were taught when you were 5. If you grew up in a home like I grew up in, you treat other people the way you want them to treat you, and that's kind of how you get by in life. And it worked. And they ended up, I'll use the word liking. I mean, I didn't see that outwardly, but the Red Cross described it as absolutely. They thought that the Somalis were somewhat sympathetic and didn't want to see harm come to me. And it was like, well, that's just bonus points. I mean, if they want to help keep me alive, if their orders are to cap me when a rescue force comes, that's probably going to at least cause them to hesitate, if nothing else. And that could be enough. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you're literally the walking embodiment of that entire curriculum working. And that's incredible to me. Cause like I said, all that survival training, that's all cerebral. There's nothing tangible about it whatsoever, because you don't imagine yourself in that situation. So that's fascinating to me, that curriculum, it saved your life. It really did.
More than once, I would argue, more than once for sure. And, it gave you strategies. Like I've always said, I don't know what I would have done otherwise, because, if you have no training and all you have is the Big Four, right? And the Big Four was great in previous conflicts, and, when we didn't really understand the nuances of all this, but it doesn't work. I mean, and the reason SEER School exists, as everyone knows, is because of the experiences of POWs in Vietnam, and trying to apply the Big Four and realizing that that's just not going to work long term. I mean, it works at a tactical level, in the first, few minutes. But when you start, getting into the various follow-on experiences that you're going to experience, you cannot rely only on that, for sure.
No, they beat you silly.
Yeah.
There's no question. They would become frustrated, and it's all about managing expectations, trying to control the narrative as best you can, but more so controlling that situation. It's easy to get into a battle of wits. It's difficult having the humility and the wherewithal to say, okay, if I do this, I might get this. If I do this, I might last another day. So that's incredibly fascinating to me. It's comforting to know that training was all worth it too, because hell, you never know. You might find yourself in a situation like that for any number of reasons.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And again, I can't say enough how much I appreciate the fact that I had the opportunity to attend the school. I do have, all this has been good, but I've one screw up that I have to disclose, and you could argue is innocent enough, but it didn't meet my standard. I can tell you that. So I mentioned the Red Cross. I was visited without warning by a delegate from the Red Cross, and you knew something was up because they came in and they cleaned the room. They actually gave me some fresh pajamas to put on. I had been laying on concrete for 5 days, and they brought in a nasty mattress, but it was still a mattress, and I was able to lay down on that. And I'm thinking, all right, so this is a show for something. Am I either going to get released or what? Either way, it's progress, right? And all of a sudden, this Caucasian blonde woman walks in the door. She's from Switzerland, and Suzanne Hofstetter is her name, and she's there to hold my hand, basically. I mean, it was pretty powerful. It really was, because you play the tough guy and you're playing the tactical game all this time, and now all of a sudden there's this woman there that at least you think you can trust. You always got to wonder. Yeah. But, you think you can trust. And it was an emotional moment, because it sort of gives you that connection to the outside world, and which you sort of put in the back burner until all of a sudden there it is. And it reminds you that, that there is something beyond this. And anyway, she didn't have anything with her because they had not given her any notice, but she spent a few moments there, and I was able to write a letter, and I wrote a letter home, and then I wrote a letter to the guys in the unit, and she took those. And then immediately following her, when I've just sort of gotten rattled a little bit emotionally, there's these two journalists that show up, and this is something that was never really covered in survival school, and it probably has been since, but not when I was there. All right, now what do I do? So with no warning and no time to really think about it, and I thought, okay, this is an opportunity for me to use this. So I decided it would be to my advantage to explain what happened, essentially recreating our conversation today. I'm going to tell you what happened from the moment the RPG hit the aircraft all the way through this moment in time, and how, what could possibly be bad about that, right? That's should give intel and information and at least situational awareness to the command and anybody that might be pondering or planning a rescue attempt. And again, at this point, there's still 6 MIA, right? So it's just not me. It's not just me at this point. So we go through all that, and they're taking their notes, and I'm getting comfortable with talking, and that's where you got to be careful. Is when you get comfortable with talking, and
the most dangerous interrogator is the friendly interrogator.
Yes, absolutely. And they slipped in the money shot, which is so what do you think about how this is how things are going here? And just without even thinking, I said, well, something's gone wrong here, and it's innocent enough, and you'd have to be a complete moron to not realize something had gone wrong there. I mean, it started out as a relief operation, and then it was a security operation, and now it's turned into basically a combat zone, which is never intended. And but I still felt I had crossed a line that I shouldn't have crossed. And as soon as the words came out of my mouth, I screwed that up. Yeah, I'm going to get debriefed. Yeah, I'm going to get debriefed on that one, right? And I beat myself up on it pretty good. I mean, for a couple of days, I was really, really upset with myself. In the end, you got to also realize I don't know what's going on outside, right? I don't even know that there's been multiple aircraft shot down. I don't know there's 18 killed. I don't know about the scope of this battle. When I got shot down, we had lost one bird, but that was it. So, I'm missing a big part of the equation here and how much attention is being put on this thing. So I don't really recognize the fact that, this thing is dominating the news at this what probably wasn't coronavirus level, but it was dominating the news. There was not much else going on at the time. And anyway, I didn't uphold the standard that I felt I should have. And now was I overly critical? Yeah, you'd argue either way. But anyway, the lesson learned is what you just alluded to, is someone who really knows how to interrogate is going to get you into that position, and that's when you're going to potentially say something that you might not have said otherwise.
Oh man, that's the truth.
Yeah.
The beatings you can take.
Yeah.
The beatings you can take. It's when they start playing games.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes most difficult. All right, so let's finish off with your release. How did that go down? What was it? Did it seem official? Did it seem nuanced? Did it seem like they were just giving up? What were your impressions there?
So I got a radio. They actually asked me about a radio. They gave me a radio, and I was listening to things going on. The president had sent the former ambassador to Somalia back into country, and so I felt that added credibility to the fact that they were saying that I was going to be released. But I also tried not to get my hopes up too high. And when the day actually came, I played it the way I played everything else, with caution. The guy said he was a Red Cross doctor. I assumed it was true, but didn't automatically believe him. He had morphine, and that's when I became more of a believer. That he gave me a shot of morphine right there in captivity, and then from there it was stick me in the back of a vehicle and get me to the compound. And at that point, I saw people I knew, and I knew at that point it was over.
My God, like I said, you're one of the few POWs since Vietnam. Vietnam was really the last conflict we saw actual POWs, POW stories, lessons learned, things like that. But that was different. That was, even though it was very much an unconventional war, it was very much a POW experience. You kind of found yourself in the middle, between like that whole hostage versus POW scenario. And I got to give you props, because that's difficult to maneuver. You're supposed to act different in each scenario. And you kind of had to skirt that line. So that's incredible. So Chief, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story. I learned a lot, because I'll be the first to admit I had not read your book yet. It's definitely the next thing I do read, because I think it is an important story. And like you and I had said before we started recording, this is kind of a segment that gets put on the back burner. There was a lot going on that day. Like you said, the 18 KIA, you had dozens wounded, you had all this going down, you had birds going down, you had Medal of Honor worthy actions, you had Distinguished Service Cross worthy actions. So it's one of those stories that kind of unfortunately gets lost in the shuffle. And I'm so glad you were able to sit down, take the time, and educate myself and others about that, because it is important. And that's why I've always found it. Whenever I do these interviews with like these amazing service members, they have these stories that just, in the grand scheme of things, get forgotten or pushed aside, things like that. And so it's important to bring those back to the forefront. So Chief, can't thank you enough. And I'm sure you've been told it a million times, but welcome home.
I appreciate that very much, Nick, and thanks for allowing me the venue to share the story and plug in the book. It is a great book. People will enjoy it if they go out and grab it. I've always said Black Hawk Down is the second best book about Somalia ever written. So prove me right and go read it. I hope you enjoy it.
Absolutely. That's on my list of things. The book is In the Company of Heroes by Chief Warrant Officer Mike Durant. Guys, do yourself a favor. Go get the book. It's too easy. It's on. I'm imagining it's a ebook format too, electronic book.
It is. I actually read it, so you'll actually get to hear my voice for hours on end.
Wow, fantastic! You guys can even do the audiobook version. Oh man, Chief, can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for taking the time, and take it easy.
All right, take care. My best to all of you.
Thank you.
Sorry, assholes, your quiet day at the office is about to get severely fucked up.